So schön, dass Sie alle da sind.
Good to see you. The 10-minute extra time has elapsed. I also welcome those who join us via streaming. Let me point out, by way of introduction, we have had long days in Bonn and now in Berlin. We were sitting together in panel discussions where there was an audience and where questions may be asked. We thought we could find another form of exchange during this conference. 3 workshops took place for entire days from a variety of sections, with auto-generating groups that came together. We will be hearing from them. First, we will be hearing by order from Conny Klaus from the section Film and Media, by way of organization of the sections with more than 300 years of history. Let us start with the art of building, i.e. architecture. Vanessa Koch is an architecture critic. She works together with the magazine Arch Plus. She has edited an entire issue on building, new building. As a critic of architecture, we asked her whether she was willing to guide a workshop that she would not call a workshop. This will be broadcast digitally. Then Carolin Naujocks from the section of music, together with Mani Sangaris, who was also partner in developing Marilyn Reinecke, who spoke in Berlin. She thought that she would also call in Florian Neuner, who is very familiar with this art. He comes from another field of art. They conducted this workshop for the entire day yesterday. Last but not least, the section Film and Medien Max Links will first take the floor, and he will report on the workshop of the film section. Georg Seeßlen will join us virtually, and we will be listening to them, well, by order of these sections, what has happened during those workshops. Thank you very much.
Something's Cooking, that took place as part of Hello everyone, my name is Tondarai Koshke and I was a participant of yesterday's workshop Something's Cooking that took place as part of involvements in different capacities in the fields of space making in the city. So this includes planning, architecture, and related theory fields, for example. So our regular discussions about critical engagement with spatial theory and practice and how to organize ourselves to work toward contributing to spatial justice and simply supporting each other have been taking place. These discussions haven't actually taken place in person yet, and yesterday's workshop was a wonderful first opportunity for us to come together and continue many of these discussions in person. So in this short video, I'm going to show you later on some of the images of our workshop, which started in the Lesesaal yesterday and eventually moved to the offices of Dekoloniale just around the corner in Wilhelmstrasse. And there we continued workshopping over a meal which we prepared together. This, of course, plays into the title of our workshop, Something's Cooking, which otherwise also refers to the way in which our group has been communicating, organizing, and just existing for such a long time without a formal structure. So something has been happening for a long time, and this workshop has simply begun to make that visible. And then finally, of course, the title notes our perspective, which is both critical of spatial practice and theory, and questions how best to make it future-proof. After discussing the many questions which workshop participants had come up with prior to the workshop in response to the title, we spent a significant amount of time workshopping a name for our group, as we very much intend on continuing our communications and engaging further with our field of action in the future, but don't have an official name yet. We are now going to hear briefly from another participant in the workshop, Tazalika M. Tere, who has a note about the more intimate contents of our workshop, as I show you some of the images. What you can actually see behind me right now is the format in which we documented just a small part of our documentation of the results of our workshop. And I'm going to hand over now to Tazalika.
Hello, this is Tazalika Tere. I'm a member of the Women Spacemakers, and I would like to talk about one specific topic that we issued, and that is becoming strong. We decided on not explaining ourselves to others meaning the conqueror. Not to explain, not to educate, but to make ourselves strong. And we did that by discussing a specific quote by Toni Morrison. And this is how it goes. She says, the very serious function of racism is distraction. It keeps you from doing your work. It keeps you explaining over and over again your reason for being. Somebody says you have no language and you spend 20 years proving that you do. Somebody says your head isn't shaped properly, so you have scientists working on the fact that it is. Somebody says you have no art, so you dredge that up. Somebody says you have no kingdom, so you dredge that up too. None of this is necessary. There will always be one more thing. And she spoke these words, Toni Morrison, on the occasion of her keynote at Portland State University of Oregon's Public Speakers Collection. This was in May 1975.
So, I hope this gives you an idea of the productive workshop Something's Cooking that took place yesterday. We'd like to thank everyone involved who made this workshop possible for us.
Guten Abend.
Good evening. We want to report on the workshop of musical criticism. Florian Neuner, writer and critic and radio author. My name is Carolin Naujocks. I'm an editor in Deutschlandfunk Kultur for the music section. It has always been difficult to say some things general about culture at the latest since modernity set in. That has a tendency to dissolve everything into individual entities. There is no overarching concept of art. Karl Dahnhaus, musicologist and aesthetician, decades ago complained about the misery of music criticism because there was no reliable educational canon on which you could build. So the claim on the critic in music must remain something paradoxical. Paradoxical also due to the fact that criticism needs to gear up to legacy standards That, however, must be implied in the conditioning that stretch through the most ambitious discourses. On the cultural pages, if you find something on the advanced music, normally they start out with a polish. What now comes is difficult, but so critique has to do with social acceptability. Ultimately, it's just about becoming aware of how to use standards, because art is not by itself and from the beginning beautiful, because it reassesses and revalues the categories of the beautiful. Any critic of music is permanently overstretched because he is facing up to a variety of musical scenes, avant-garde scene, musicology, electronic music, real-time music, Echtzeit-music. The critic, however, is also confronted with a variety of discourses on which to negotiate music, the avant-garde discourse, the institutional and critical of institutions discourse, and post-diverse, post-structural discourses that are guided by interest conflicts. On top of all that, art is never to be taken for granted. A new piece, circumstance allowing, it may be so novel that the traditional categories fail utterly, while analytical categories can be developed out of the musical piece itself. That's the situation that we found. We played out various approaches. We looked for models to check whether they are helpful in structuring and in considering. We had the 4 political aspects of music that Matthias Sparlinger presented in 1991 as a response to the surveys of the Musiktexte, function, productions, mode of production, content, subject, and poetics and style. Each musical piece can be checked out against these categories. Fremdarbeit by Johannes Kreidler and Fragmente, Stelle Andiotima by Luigi Nono. We tried to figure out how the mode of production guides the composer Kreidler and how it is explained by the composer himself, and how it is also informative for the perception of the following musical piece, while it remains rather subliminal in the case of Luigi Nono. In the string quartet, everything is hinged upon poetics and style. The 2 pieces are informative for pieces. No, it's texts that preform the reception. In the case of Kreidler, by the preface of the composer. In Nono, it's the Hölderlin quotes that are embedded in the musical notation. Not least after the victory of the concept art, this has become clear. Intentions can often be articulated only through paratext. In the period of curatorship, the consistency and linkability of discourses is decided by the paratext. It cannot be compared to the metatext production in the new music. Aesthetically speaking, there is a negotiation between music and language in language musical pieces that try to articulate dealing with Farm Anisquau by Hans G. Helms of 1960 was meant to show the hurdles that are obstructing an adequate reception. A critic of the Spiegel declared his unwillingness and incompetence for this salad of words that he had a hard time to accept as literature. But even today, as there is so much talk about inter- and transdisciplinarity, the competences of institutions and departments may give rise to problems for art that stretches across various departments. Criticism of art differentiates or categorizes, evaluates by the help of standards that it should ideally also explain. Ideally, it's about a reconstruction of the subject matter at hand. It's always a tentative procedure. The history of criticism can also be seen as a history of productive second thoughts. In view of lingering processes of conventionalization in new music, there is a sort of counter-movement noticeable that questions traditional cultures of production and performance. In view of those ever more ambitious demands, criticism cannot live up to its own claims because it has also to fight for its own position. The erosion of criticism is less of a private matter rather than a mechanism of power and dominion. Thomas Kranz puts it like this, because criticism implies also a certain distance, not only to one's own thoughts and ideas, but also to the public, that determines what contemporary culture is. The crisis of criticism is a permanent status. Its legitimacy has always been questioned. Defiling critics can fill entire bookshelves. Criticism can be discussed at two levels. First, the artisans' considerations, who talks to who and with what means and what should be presupposed on a second level. The context comes into the view. Where do you listen to critics? What are the places and the venues? Are they paid or unpaid? What's the role played by network publications? Is the scene with new music of those who are interested in new music, are they so circumscribed that critical distance is hardly possible any longer, or is the field of experimental music so splintered that nobody has an overview? Critics can be differentiated whether they look into the house of the poet or look out of the house of the poet. As Walter Benjamin puts it, no form of criticism can do without a reference to the technique of critique by Walter Benjamin. He's a strategist in the battle for literature who does not take one side, needs to be silent, and enthusiasm for art is alien to the art critic. The piece of art is the weapon in the hand of the spiritual mind. Works of art should not be instrumentalized ideologically. They want to pay justice to the works of art, and they want to gain their standards for the judgment from the works of art themselves. But what does that mean? Well, we can conclude this overview only with questions that have been formulated, that need to be unanswered. How can criticism be defined against communication and education? How would critics deal with its supposed power? Who do they talk to? To who do they respond? To the artist? Or is his partner the other critic? Do we see anything in new music more than just one critic that writes over just one event? Do we have feedback amongst critics? Do we have a discourse of criticism? Will the task of the critics, in view of transferability thanks to new media, expanding? There was talk about curatorial turn. Everybody wants to be curator. What does this mean? This victorious march of the curatorial trade? What does it mean, this victorious march of the discursive? Is it about controlling the modes of reception? Further question, how can I deal with the uncertainty whether I have heard a piece of music in an adequate way? Should I reveal my own uncertainty? How can I reach beyond music, beyond a subjective approach? Do I recognize my own conditioning? What's the borderline between art and activism? Do I talk about a piece of art and its performance? And what's the interrelationship between the two? It's also about the big question of cohesion and adhesion. The ever more fragmented differentiation, does it lead to new experiences of communality, or does it hinder the creation of new identities? Would it be possible that criticism loses itself in the meta level because it loses sight of the specifically musical? Heinz Klaus Metzger once quipped in a rather polemical way, it does not matter what an artist creates, but what he does away with. It's a plea for an ideological approach ex negativo that different from positive utopias looks at what happens if certain things are simply abandoned or do no longer happen in music, for example. The uniform of aura or style. This is also an option for the critic not to tell what it is, but what it is not, or what it is no longer. But we should also take to heart what Hans Magnus Enzensberger wrote into the Bible of the critical trade. It is neither the task nor the possibilities of criticism to abolish its subject matters. Thank you.
Okay. An der Sitzung teilgenommen haben.
So, who participated alphabetically? And I will not name all of their professions because everybody's in a different profession. Robert Branker, Max Linz, Bert Rebhandel, Sophie Charlotte Reger, Elena Reiterer, Wolfgang Herm Schmidt, Georg Seeßlen, Dennis Vetter. And by invitation by Cornelia Klaus, Section Film and Media Art Academy. I am talking as a participating reporter here. Sadly, the robot that Robert Braunkamp proposed is not already here that can present the results from the workshops here. This robot is imagined as having thirst and is nervous before he will give over to Georg Seeßlen. There is a protocol from 8 to 9 voices from the short-term memory beginning the house. In the arts, the different arts mediated by criticism is not working anymore. So where do we go on the weekend? What film, which books now or someone else? Critique by order, not because we want to do that, but because everything of this should be okay. So the role of the criticism has changed. Now, how does it look? Lamento is avoided, and most works are well paid, and so that they make other works that are worse paid possible. So networking with friends who have better orders and can help. So I ask myself where Georg is, because normally he should be here with me. That's at least what we agreed upon. And so, okay, right, there he is behind, on the back side of the room. Right, I am amidst our speech. I don't know if you've heard, but I'll just continue. But who speaks? Who has the access to critique? Who decides what kind of criticism is legitimate? What does power look like? White, male, consumptuous? Well, do you have your niche because you have been able to establish your perspective in this discourse? Then you don't get out of that niche anymore. This own geography is saying that critics' personalities don't hide, and there's nothing that they can really show us. So last 30 years, there was a turn. The process of recognition that is being kept. Why do we talk about crisis as taken for granted? It is not anymore a golden age, but I say yes, maybe, but I fear in the sense of golden 20s. Critique as societal criticism. So go to the museum with the cinematic critiques, with the film critic. Political criticism in the 20th century, without making reference to the communist idea, without having that social democracy in Western Europe, without the USA, without the competing systems. That is weird, at least. There are other channels that can get to different audiences, not only those whose parents have read newspapers and studied. Those exchanges are working on self-organization and self-autonomous and reflexive action. What do the super institutions do? The criticism is coming from the far right, the loudest. So now I quote from a seminar with Daniel Millet and Straub in the 80s. Robert Gramkamp was there. He says in the film studies, cineasmus as a lack of ambition. Georg, I pass on to you. I could limit my part to one word after this great analysis, to one word that would be more precise, but I want to share what I felt during those workshops, because we didn't talk. On the one hand, we never talk about crisis, or almost didn't, but we talked about the transformation. We have to be different, and what has to be different in film criticism and the critique itself means, and that our work is becoming more fluid. It becomes more on the move, and it's not there or here, but it's not bound to one location. And that means for us that the dialogue is becoming very important, because just like Max said earlier, in the early days, we were all in one house or one building, and now we're nomads. We have become nomads. We're we're digital nomads. We are not anymore there where we might have a cultural place, a cultural space, but we are on the move and on our way to connect all these different locations of criticism. So we do not want in the future to say this film is good, it's bad, it says this or that. This film is according to this theory or making reference to that one. But it is about making, networking films for what happens on the world. So, and it is about networking films and the film industry with so that the networks of the different discourses, the feminist one, the decolonialist one, the post-migrant one, and so on, and to network those to make those discourses exchange. But we can say in the end, well, democracy as well. The film critics of today are lived democracy, what I would say. And we do not want to be the judgment and the instance anymore, but we want to make films go into conversation with each other, go into dialogue as critics. And it has become clear that in our conversation, we managed to do that. And it might be that in our conversation, in our what we used to call workshop before we went in there, we had ideas for future film critique, just spontaneous from the energy that we had. And this idea is closely connected to the fact that all of us are active in many different discourses and many different niches, and we all are excited to get into exchange with each other. And this is what we managed to do. We succeeded to do. Thank you.
nochmal von unserer Seite.
Thank you very much also from our side, maybe for the audience in all three workshops. They thought about making a bigger report in another form, maybe in a magazine, a radio interview, or another form, just in case you're interested.
The meh. The whoa. The meh. The whoa. The meh. Whoa. The whoa. Meh. The meh. Whoa. The whoa. Meh. The whoa. Meh. The in the sect in the meh. In meh. Insect. The meh. Insect. The whoa. The whoa. Insect. The in whoa. Insect. sect, the worm, the insect, insect, the in the in the the insect, the the in the in the the